Um, okay, so for anybody who's joining us, because we're going to be putting this on YouTube, my name is Sarah Gutman. I'm a professional genealogist, and tonight we're going to be talking about boots on the ground genealogy. So before we begin, if I could just ask any little audience participation with the people here, if you wouldn't mind, anyone want to share how long they've been researching their genealogy for?
As I just said, it's over 10 years, probably close to.
Okay, 10 years. Anybody else feel free to share, or has anyone been doing this for over 20 years?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And the reason I ask this is because there's a very important invention, which we're all on this evening, that really has changed the way that not only we do genealogy, but also the world. Anybody have any idea what I'm talking about? That's really brought genealogy and made it so much more accessible in the last 20 years or so.
Internet.
The internet, yes, we're all sitting here on the internet talking. You're in my living room right now, on the internet, and the internet has been huge with helping with genealogy discoveries. Thank you for that. But I have actually been doing this myself for over 25 years. I am 39 years old. I started when I was 12 or 13, and I found this, I keep all my letters. I wanted to share this letter. And it was a letter I wrote before I was Sarah Gutman. I was Sarah Gadati, and it's dated April 22nd, 1996. And if you can see here, just I have the address of the church that I'm looking at. And I say, "Dear sir, madam, I am almost 14 years old." I don't know why I thought like that would really impress them, that I was almost 14 years old. And I'm trying to trace my family history. And I'm just asking them if they have any record on my great-great-grandparents. Well, they didn't have the luxury back then, as I'm sure many of you were around, to just go online and to look for these records. If you wanted to find something out about your family, you really need to devote yourself to doing that. So you would grab things like the yellow pages, if you remember those. My parents would get so mad at me because I would call the operator and I would ask them for the addresses and phone numbers of places throughout America, you know, because I wasn't paying the phone bill. I would also beg my parents to go and to drive me to libraries, and I would take a Bonine or a Dramamine because I would get car sick when I was looking through the microfilm going so fast. And luckily, we don't have to do those things anymore. But still, you know, you may have to do microfilm and also call up things. You not necessarily don't have to do them, but we've kind of gotten away from doing that. A lot of times people give up with searching if they can't find something within 30 seconds. It's not on a database. I put this information in on FamilySearch or Ancestry, and now I can't find it. It doesn't exist. I'm not going to find it. Well, what I want to show you tonight is a couple of tricks and techniques about how to get back and use those on the ground techniques that we used to use over 20 years ago that would get results. As of 2017, only 10% of genealogical records were available online. And if you think about it, that's really nothing. It's a tiny little piece of the pie, and a lot of people getting frustrated with if they can't find something, they're giving up. They think they've hit this brick wall. One really exciting thing that has happened in the past year is anybody ever go out to Salt Lake City by any chance and ever happen to visit the Family History Library? Did you say yes or no?
No, a friend of mine went.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's a really fabulous. Oh, Peter said he's been there. Peter and I were just talking about how he's has family from Utah. So, hold on. I don't know why. I'm trying to, for some reason, it's so weird. Hold on. I went to go look at the chat, but then it just went on the full screen. I'm sorry. I have to just push this onto the screen here. We'll try it that way. Okay, great. We'll get there. All right. So if you've ever get the chance to go to Salt Lake City and you're into genealogy, you need to go there. You can just have, I call it a vacation. Other people might call it torture. I don't know. Depends on your idea of fun. Have a vacation there and just go through the stacks and just look at records. And it's amazing. Well, one of the things that FamilySearch was doing is they were taking the thousands of microfilm that they have, and they are in the process of putting all that microfilm online so that it's readily available, so that you don't have to go to Salt Lake City to go look at that. It's in the process right now of being indexed. So it will take a few years, but if you know the actual record collection, you can in fact go onto the free website, FamilySearch.org, and check it out. FamilySearch.org is run by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And you probably, if you've never heard of FamilySearch, you've probably heard of their paying site, which is Ancestry. Ancestry is the paid one. FamilySearch is free. And actually, it's actually better, even though it's free as far as records go. They have more stuff on it. So there is a lot of stuff that is available online. Now, going out to, sorry, I'm hitting something and something else just popped up on my screen. Before you start looking for something, it's important to, it sounds kind of silly. Oh, I just heard Marianne said, what's the name of the place in Salt Lake City? It's the Family History Library. And I'm pretty positive that anybody in Utah would be able to tell you about it, at least about its whereabouts, about its existence. It's pretty well known. So it's the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. Definitely check that out when you're in Utah. So before you begin any journey, before you start looking for information, the key is to knowing what you want to at least find out. And you want to know where you want to have an idea of where you are going to be looking. A couple of years ago, I was sitting down with my cousin's husband, and I was going through his family tree, because that's what I do when anybody, enters into the family. I sit down with them and we go over their family tree, whether they want to or not. I don't care. We're doing it. And after a few hours, he was entertaining me by doing this. And he finally turned to me and he said, Sarah, what are we looking for? What are we doing this for? And I don't know why, but I never thought to ask that before. Like, I was just looking for things. But if you really want to find something, you really want to set yourself with a goal. And some of the research objectives, because it can get really overwhelming if you're just saying, okay, I want to just trace my family back to the beginning of time. Well, you're kind of probably going to lead yourself up to some disappointment. So we want to create these research objectives, these research goals that are almost tangible, that we say, okay, we've accomplished this, let's go on to the next project here. So some research objectives that you may want to consider, or kind of form your own after this, is trace my maternal great-grandmother's line back 3 generations, locate where in Ireland my family is from, provide a direct link to my Patriot Revolutionary War ancestor, obtain Italian citizenship through my paternal great-grandfather, discover who the unknown father was of my paternal great-great-grandmother. These are all research objectives that I've had, and for my own self. And when I work for, as I mentioned, Legacy Tree, and when we get clients, most of the time they come in and they say, just trace my family back as far as you can. But we say, okay, it's going to take a lot of time to do this. What do you want to focus on? So by knowing that, that's really going to help direct you. Now, one of the first stops, once you've come up with a research objective, is to start looking around for clues. Start looking in your own house, your relative's house, for clues for your family that they might have, like little breadcrumbs that they've left for you. Sometimes the things that you may even see every day, you don't realize that it's something that holds this genealogical value for you. So as you're going around your house and snooping through your family members and, going through closets and everything, some things to look out for that are kind of telling are old toys. Whose toys were they? What was life like? Why did they have this kind of, item? Who was using it? Jewelry, that's a very common heirloom that's passed down. Again, who wore it? What's the story behind this? I'm a really big fan of getting things appraised and kind of seeing what they were worth or what time period they were worth. I had a couple of items of jewelry that I thought was from the 1940s, but it turned out it was from the 1880s. So that was a fun find. And based on when these jewelry was made, obviously that's going to change who I think may have been the owner of it. Old letters, journal entries, if you can find them, they are just great, especially old letters, because, for example, you can see that maybe somebody was married in 1870. But if you find the letter between a husband and a wife, you can really get a sense of what that relationship was like. It gives you a personalization from it that just a regular record can't have. Just an example of that is my great grandparents met. They had a one-night stand, and my great grandmother got pregnant, and my great grandfather went off to World War I. And she, I guess, kept the letters that he had written to her. I guess she didn't really write to him, and he was writing about like, hey, heard that baby was going to be born. How's that working out for you? And it was a very cold, distant relationship that you could see. And that means so much more than this couple was married in this year. Really interesting stuff. Other things to look for is if you have
a workplace message which arrived on the other two people that were there.
I think somebody's unmuted. There's also anything that has to do with any type of war. I have downstairs in my office, I have my great grandfather's helmet that he wore in World War I. Any type of bullets that you may have found, buttons, whatever, just look for them. They tell a story, and it's really cool to hold something that was your ancestors. And people didn't have a lot back then. We live in this very commercialized society where goods are all over the place. So if they're passing this down, it meant something to them. And try to figure out that story behind that meaning. And of course, you have the opportunity to talk to your family members. I look at this picture, and so often they tell people to talk to the older generation. And while that's true, a lot of times you never know who the younger people who might have started their own bank of collecting things. Right before I had this talk, I was just sitting down with my 7-year-old son, and he loves hearing stuff about our family history. And I'm positive that he knows more stuff than my 90-year-old grandparents, who are very well with it. But, he just happens to know more because he listens, and the other ones are just kind of like, oh, they're dead. Who cares? So be that person who goes to parties, who the person sees coming and they're like, oh God, she's going to ask me about my dead relatives again. I'm just going to, go fill up my plate with cheese and try to avoid her. So be that person who just talks to everybody. Try to get as much information as you can. One of the things, if you happen to have this in your family, consider yourself extremely lucky. It's like one of those genealogy gems, is a family Bible. Before the days of the internet, and still now, I know my mom has one. People would keep their family tree inside of their family Bible. There would be pages dedicated to it, usually in the front or the center of the Bible. And that's where people would record the events, birth, marriage, and death of their family, and also usually their family of origin, and their great grandparents. I had a family Bible of my great grandparents, and that was fantastic because I could not find their marriage record anywhere. But I saw in their family Bible that they were married on August 2nd of 1863. And I went back to check one of the records in another church that I had already checked, and it turned out that that church had spelt their last name wrong. And that's why they weren't coming back with a positive search for me. So the information in that family Bible was super helpful in locating other records. Things that you might find in a family Bible are births, baptisms, marriages, holy orders if people decided to enter into the priesthood or became a nun, deaths, family trees, places of worship, and burial locations. Those are all little tidbits that you might find in there. Now, keep in mind that even though it's the people of that time period writing this information, it may or may not be accurate. One of the best indicators of this is check, open to the front, and look at the copyright date of the family Bible. If the Bible is written in 1900 and they're recording events that happened in 1870, you know that there's a 30-year gap in between the time of the events happen, and it could be faulty or misleading. Look to see if the penmanship is the same when you're reading these Bibles, or is the ink the same? Are people recording these events as they happened? Is it the same person recording these events? What's going on? I will say for myself, people do make mistakes, even people at the time period. I had made a couple years ago for my mother-in-law, I got her a calendar. It was like a family tree calendar. I put the birthday and the anniversary days of her great grandparents and her great great uncles who she'd never met before. I had everybody in there, and she calls me up and she's like, "Sarah, you messed up your own husband's birthday," because I put his birthday was November, I can't even remember, November 3rd, but it's really November 2nd. So, here I am, and I think I know everybody's birthday and stuff, and I mess up on my own husband's, who I see, multiple times a day. So just remember that your family could also have made mistakes when they were writing things down. So how do you know where to look once you've kind of exhausted what's around your family, just around your house and your family's house? Where do you start looking from there? Well, it's going to be one of those situations where you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And by the baby out with the bathwater, I'm talking about the internet. The internet is your friend. And use the internet. You might not sometimes find all the answers that you are looking for on the internet, but use the internet to help guide you to find those places that you are looking for. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second. So first of all, make a list of all the facts that you already know. Start writing down things, and you'll find a lot of times once you start writing down things, you'll be surprised about the stuff you do already know. Concentrate on the 3 vital events: birth, marriage, and death. You want to look for places and keep a list of that's where you're looking at. That's kind of your scope. First stop, which is great for new genealogists and also people who've been doing this for decades, is the census records. Census records, which I will talk about a little bit more, are wonderful resources. They are taken every 10 years, starting in 1790. The 1890 census was destroyed, so don't bother looking for it that way. And there are errors on the census because it's only as accurate as the person providing the information and the person writing down that information, and then the person in modern day who's transcribing that information onto the computer. So there's definitely sometimes a game of telephone that can be happening. But census records are a phenomenal resource. Keep in mind, as you're starting to look, that borders change. Some area that may have been what you know as a certain town or a certain county may not always have been that. A great place to research this is going to the FamilySearch Wiki. It's on Google. You go to FamilySearch Wiki, and from there, you can type in the name of a town, and it'll tell you what that town used to be, if there was a part of that town or county that once broke out and became something else, and what records are available and when those records started. Start researching maps, atlases, take a look at where things were, where borders were, where your family was in relationship to those items. As I mentioned, FamilySearch Wiki is a really great source for that. Also, I'm not really that big of a fan of this website, but it is helpful. is cindyslist.com. It's one of those places to go where when you don't know where to go. So you put in, how do I do this type of research? And they'll give you certain websites that are helpful to that. Yes.
What did you just say, this last one? I
Sure.
didn't hear.
Cindy's List, it's right here. So it's actually this woman named Cindy. And
Right. Oh,
she's
I see.
a real person. When the internet started, she started bookmarking websites that she thought were helpful for genealogists. And now that's like her thing. So if you want to, I often compare this to FamilySearch Wiki is more if you go into a store where the items are out in front of you and you see like, okay, I like this, I don't like that. Cindy's List is more of, and I do love this store, is like a Marshall's, where if you go through Marshall's and you kind of have to go through the racks and some things are not good, but then you find something that's great. You just kind of have to do a lot more digging and a lot more looking with Cindy's List. And of course, Google. Google's great. Google Books, which is a little bit different from Google. They have records available on there also. But what I'm saying Google is Google what churches are in the area that you're looking for. Google the address and the email of the historical society. Use that to help you. Google when some churches were established. And before you get too excited because you found out that your family is over from Europe or South America or Asia, or wherever they're from, make sure you exhaust the American records before you go crossing the pond. And the pond is the Atlantic Ocean. Any questions so far? No? Okay. So one of the first places to look is church and synagogue records. These records are really helpful because in most cases, churches began recording vital events before it became mandated by the state or the town. The magic number for New York, or rather the magic year for New York, is 1880. In 1880, New York State mandated that vital records be kept. A lot of religious organizations were doing this well before New York State mandated it. So you can call up a church, you can contact a local historical society, and you could start looking at church records. There also are some church records available online. I know the Archdiocese of New York, okay. The Archdiocese of New York has their records available on Find My Past, which is helpful, and so does the Diocese of Boston as well. So some things that you can find here in these church records are birth and baptism. Usually people, especially in the Catholic faith, were baptized within a few days to a week of when they were born. And if they're not, it's usually indicated that they were an adult when they received baptism. If people were confirmed, marriages, divorce, annulments, death, parents, godparents, and sponsors. By the way, divorce records are probably the hardest records to get your hands on. So if you have a family member who got divorced and you're looking for their divorce record, just forget about it. There is a very tight 100-year privacy law on divorce records. So you can move on to something else if that has been bothering you for a while. Now, an interesting thing is you may believe that your family was of a particular faith, but that may not be a case. And they may have switched religions multiple times. Because if you think about it, especially if you're traveling out more towards the West or you're in a rural community, you may have been Catholic, when you were living in this certain area, but now you've moved and the closest Catholic church is 20 miles away. And there's no such things as cars because they haven't been invented yet. However, there's a very nice building that's a Protestant church 2 miles away from you. So guess what? You're going to turn Protestant because that's easier. Then maybe you move down later on and there's a Baptist church that's closer to you. People become Baptists. They would usually go to the church that was closest to them. If they were really devout though, they would travel those 20 miles once a week to go to service and to be members of that community. So don't get too hung up of saying, okay, my family was, a particular religion. Just be open to, I guess, all church records if you can't find them in a certain spot that you were looking for. With church records, names are often written in Latin, so be aware of that. So the names that you're seeing is not the names that these people would be going by in normal circumstances. You can look on the website behindthename.com. It's a free website, behindthename.com, and it's really great for really any type of names. It gives you the meaning of names, and you can also put in, you could put in my name, Sarah, and it'll tell you what my name is in other languages. So you can kind of see, oh, this is how I'd be going if I was Italian or whatever, or in Latin. What would that transcribe to normally? So one thing that I like to do is look at Google, or I don't know if that's the right term for it, to Google the churches in the area. And then pretty quickly you can go on their website and you can see when this church was established, or if that church was something else. Sometimes you can even call a church up in a local area. Maybe I live in Miller Place. I could call. Oh, what'd you say? Someone say something? Oh, okay. You can call up a church and say, hey, how long have you been here for? Were there any other churches in the area? And if they say, oh yeah, there was a church, they closed in the 1960s. Go ahead and ask them, do you know where those records would be? Because they may have acquired those records for themselves, or they might have gone to a local historical society, or there may be some type of book that has those records in there. Look at my next one here. Okay. As I had mentioned just a few times before, historical genealogical societies are fantastic resources, especially if you got a good one in your neighborhood. You can call up the historical society or the local archive, and you can ask, you just tell them who you're looking for. They have records there that vary based on the organization. If they have naturalization records based on certain time periods, early marriage records, estate records, those probate records, newspapers, obituaries, local church records, cemetery transcripts, maps, atlases, biographies, town records, family Bibles, compiled genealogies. I got this article here. This is my great grandfather. And I went to the Blair County, which, by the way, if anybody has ancestors from Pennsylvania, this is a wonderful historical society. It was the Blair County Genealogical Society. Super helpful there. They have records from all over Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and Ohio. But you go into this historical society, and on one side, they have compiled genealogies that people have donated over the years for their family history. And they're in these binders, and they're organized by last names. And sometimes they have indexes of people who have been mentioned in these books. On another side of the wall, they have books full of transcriptions of church records in the area. And that's fantastic resources they have for these. They also, a lot of times with these local towns, especially in these rural communities, towns would put out almost like a yearbook about the events that were happening in the area, sometimes anniversary editions. And this article here was inside, it was a book called The Souvenir of Loretto. And it was an anniversary edition for this church, St. Michael's in Loretto. And they had my great-great-grandfather on here. And it gave a little picture of him and a little description about him. Now, I'm just going to read this to you because I'm going to read this and I'm going to show you where you can then do some jumping off research based on this. So Thomas Wills, son of John Wills and Rachel Durbin, who were among the first settlers of this section, was born near Loretto in Pennsylvania on June 11th, 1807, and was baptized by Father Gallitzin. And through now in his 93rd year and a widower for the third time, he is remarkably active and healthy. He led the life of a farmer until the burden of increasing years rendered him incapable of such hard and rough work. He now resides with his daughter, Mrs. Joseph Baker, my great-great-grandma, near St. Augustine, and occasionally visits Loretto to talk over old times with a few surviving friends, not of his youth, but of his manhood, for he has outlived all of his contemporaries. Interestingly, what this article doesn't tell you is that he's gotten picked up a couple times because he loves to run around naked at the farms in the area. But, you know, it's crazy old man, crazy old man Will is walking around naked again, but that seemed to not make it into the church history. So from looking at this article, there was a whole bunch of people in the town that were recorded here. I see first who his parents were. I see when he was born. So now I can go look, which I did, to go find a baptismal record for him in the church in Loretto. He's a widow for a third time. I was then able to find all 3 of his marriage records. And if I had looked at the census records, by the way, all of his wives were named Mary. And if I looked at the census records, you wouldn't have known that he was married multiple times. You would have just thought that this woman's age was just all over the place. But this was an indication that, he was married, and I could do some more digging that way. And then it puts him in the town where he would later pass away with his daughter. So those are all things that you can use as jumping off points for individuals. If you talk to somebody from a historical society, ask them what were the local newspapers in the area during whatever time period you're looking for, and then ask them, where can you go and look for these articles? Sometimes they have a login for maybe a certain particular database. For example, the Newsday on Long Island, Newsday newspapers are not part of the website newspapers.com or Genealogy Bank, which is very common. However, the local library does have a subscription to the Newsday archives, and you can get it through them. Similarly, with these genealogical historical societies, they might have access to these newspapers that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. So that's a great little secret, I guess. Anybody have any questions or anything? No? Okay. Another great resource, especially in New York, and this is kind of one of my dream jobs to have at some point in my life. So if anybody knows how I can get this, send it my way. They also have appointed, every town in New York has an appointed town and county historian. And it's an appointed position, and this person really has a wealth of local historical knowledge. They're so nice whenever you talk to them, because I think they're so excited to just talk to somebody who is interested in learning about the town. I know I get super excited, which is why I'm doing this, whenever anybody wants to talk to me about genealogy, and that's how they are usually when people want to ask them about the town history. So you can call up, you can email the town historian. It's as simple as going to Town of Sayville Town Historian, looking at it that way, getting their contact information, and ask the person if they can point you towards specific books and records that they know of, and how can you go about getting that. And a lot of times these records are already available on Google Books. No. So they can point you towards these specific resources and see what other exciting, I was going to say adventures you can find or sources.
Can I write on the back of your papers that you wrote it on?
No.
No, like draw.
Yeah, sure.
Like on the back.
No.
No, ones that don't have writings on the back.
Oh, sorry.
Like,
okay, so first, next thing you can look at is cemetery records. Has anybody used Find a Grave or obituaries or anything in the resources? Cemetery records have a great wealth of information. There's a wonderful website called findagrave.com. There's also Billion Graves and internment.com. Those are some other big ones. And you can type in the name of your family members, and they'll show you, usually they'll show you a picture of their headstone, which is really cool. And when they were born or when they died and whatever, and where they are buried. So for a lot of people, this is kind of the end of the road for them. They think, okay, I saw this picture, that's the end of it. But I'm going to challenge you to go a step further and actually contact the cemetery where your family was buried and see what records they have there for you. So call the cemetery or email the cemetery. If you're going to call a cemetery, call them usually in the middle of the day, more towards the mid-afternoon, because in the morning times, they're usually working with people who are coming in with funerals, so they don't have as much time to talk to you. We'll call them up and say, do you have the information of this person, a burial record for the person, whose name I saw on Find a Grave, or I think this person may be buried there. Do you have more information about them? And their burial records will usually include the dates of death, if you're lucky, the dates of birth, the ages of the person, sometimes the parents' names, and then go further, because they won't usually ask you this, is ask them who else is buried in the plot with the person. They can usually see that on their computer, whatever they're looking at, and who paid for the burial. Sometimes people will be put in burial plots of their friends or family members. Other times they're just kind of thrown into these plots where somebody had an open spot, and their family then just indirectly pays that family for the burial spot.
Yes.
Then go ahead and ask the cemetery if they know what funeral parlor was used, if that was in the burial record. Hold on 1 second, I'm just going, oh, sorry.
What if you're not sure? Oops, where'd she go? Sarah, what if you're not sure where the cemetery is? Like, I have relatives in Brooklyn where they got sick and someone died, but then later when the husband died, he's in a plot with other people, but the earlier relative is missing. How do you find records for that?
So if you can't find that on their death record, or
let me back up there. How do you find a list of what death records are available in New York?
great question. I'll show you that at the end, actually. It's a good question. Also, too, if you don't know the cemetery, just start calling people. I'm like a psychopath where I find the local cemeteries and I just start cold calling them. And just say, hey, do you have this person in there? And I've gone up to about 20 cemeteries, and sometimes you usually will find the person eventually if you just go through and just start calling. I find the more populated ones are usually probably have the most luck with it because they are more populated. And the reason I said to ask for what funeral parlor was used, it's kind of a macabre question, but these funeral parlors are often maintained by the same family for generations, and they have their old records. And these people, when they died, the undertaker was the one collecting the information that would go on the death record. And they are not held to that same privacy standard, I guess, that the state is, where you have to, prove that you're related to this person and provide them with all information. And then in New York, you're waiting 10 months for a certificate. They can tell you that information right over the phone. And that's really cool. They can also email it to you. I sometimes just ask, hey, can you take a picture with your phone and send it to me? If a place of worship is mentioned in the cemetery records, contact that church. Ask them if they have any other baptismal records or marriage records or any other records for the family that might involve them. Cemetery records too, if you get a chance to look at the headstones, see if there's any symbols. Is there any indication of a flag that's been planted symbolizing some type of service in the military? Is there any type of religious symbols? I know on my father-in-law's grave, they have a Celtic cross and edelweises. A Celtic cross is to symbolize the Irish descent, and the edelweiss flowers is considered Germany. Though neither of my in-laws went to Germany or Ireland, they wanted to have those on there, but it's just an indication of a little bit about that person's life. Again, go to findagrave.com. If you've never explored that, have some fun with it. It's a really great website. The courthouses are not just for people getting in trouble with the law. Courthouses have a ton of genealogical treasures buried inside of them. They have land records, and I'll talk about land records a little more in a second, but land records are the oldest records that we have in this country. There's estate and probate records, and again, I'll dive into that in a little bit. There's last will and testaments, naturalization records, custody bonds. And by custody bonds, back in the 19th century, if a woman passed away, it was not necessarily understood that her children would then go to her husband. So a husband, if he wanted to keep his own children, he would have applied to the court to say that he's going to take custody of his own children. So in your research, if you come across a spouse dying young, especially usually in childbirth, go to the courthouse and see if there's a custody bond that says what happened with the children. Even if they all stay together, that husband would have likely have petitioned for their children. And they would have also mentioned a lot of times how his spouse passed away, which is pretty interesting. Of course, we have criminal records, tax records, which are kind of boring, but they are evidence sometimes, the only evidence sometimes that people existed because they paid taxes. Sure.
This is particular to me, but I have an uncle who was a New York City police officer in the 1920s, and I can't find any information about his service, but I know he was involved in a lot of criminal, whatever you call them, in Manhattan.
Oh, cool.
How long does it take to get those records, or where do you go?
Do you know what cases in particular he was involved in? Do you have any?
I just know the time frame he was in Manhattan and the precinct he was in Manhattan.
So it depends on, so one of the good places to check too for like people with police records is the pension, is to look into
Right.
that. Also to any newspaper articles, especially on the website Fulton History. Have you checked that out?
No, I haven't. Actually, he was, I don't know what the word is, discharged, because he was actually in a robbery where he was injured by an assailant, and
Oh, wow.
he went on a medical discharge. But I can't, how do I find out about that incident and what, it
So
was
you
that
probably
Yeah, I'm
have to
sorry.
find out the more about the case and the name that case would have gone under.
right. How would I find that?
I guess that's a great question. That I would, I would actually, honestly, I would call up the courthouse and, just say you want to talk to criminal records and just say that, you had the situation. How would you go about finding this? Sometimes based on the area, people have digitized things of anybody whose name is involved in a trial or whatever is going to come up in the database. Otherwise, you might have to know like the exact, defendant and plaintiff involved in the situation. But I would just
Right.
call up, the Manhattan courthouse and just tell them the situation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, or the New York City archives too. That's another great resource too for anybody from New York City.
I look at a lot of newspapers for
Okay.
looking for articles, but I actually have another uncle who's a New York City police officer too, and he has tons of articles about his service.
Oh,
But he
cool.
was in Brooklyn, and this other uncle was in Manhattan, and I don't seem to have any. So
Hmm.
maybe I don't know whether I'm looking at the
Well,
wrong
you know what?
newspaper.
Also, too, Brooklyn Eagle has a lot of articles available online, whereas Manhattan newspapers aren't as accessible, I guess, yet.
Right.
So that's another thing to consider also.
All right. Well, thank you.
Give them a call and see what they have.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure. And based on where you're looking for, what jurisdiction you have, the vital records are usually found in a town clerk's office or also in the orphans court office. I know my family in Pennsylvania, their vital records are kept in the orphans court office, which has nothing to do with actual orphans. It's a very deceiving name. But so the town clerk and the orphans court is usually where you want to go. And by the way, ordering vital records through the town clerk or the court is so much cheaper and faster and easier than if you were to go on that website, Vital Check, if you ever looked at that website. The website Vital Check, which kind of is the one that you're automatically directed to if you want to go send out a vital record, you're going to save about $50 if you go directly to the town clerk or the orphans court, and several months of your life in waiting. So those are just some things to consider. So naturalization records, those are some things that can be found in a courthouse. They're also things that can be found at a historical society sometimes. For your naturalization records, that's when people become American citizens. There's several different parts of it. There's the Declaration of Intent, the petition, and the Oath of Allegiance, so that you're looking for. Naturalization records, just like a lot of records, have gotten better over time. Prior to 1906, they didn't really provide that much information. And in 1906, they also started being maintained on the federal level. If your family became an American citizen prior to 1906, you need to know the exact court where your family was coming from or registered with to find those records. And you have to contact that court to find out those records or to look for those records. So this is my great grandpa's naturalization paper. He naturalized in 1932, and as a later record, it gives his picture right here. It also tells the original name that he came to this country as. He's Carlo Guidotti, but everybody here knew him as Charles Guidotti. Naturalization records, they're going to usually provide you with the name of the ship that the person came on, a physical description, which is pretty cool. He's medium built, brown eyes, brown hair, 5 feet 6 inches, and he weighs 165 pounds. It gives you his birth date. It also tells you a little bit about his family. He's saying about how he has his son, my grandpa, Charles, and his daughter, also his wife and where she's from. And here you can see his handwriting, his signature, and sometimes witnesses are on there too, which can kind of give clues to other family members that they're related to. So again, naturalization records, call your courthouse, ask where they are.
Is that something you can search yourself, or you have to like ask somebody else to do it when you get there?
Depends on the place. Where I've gone, I've been able to search it for myself. And if you have family in New York City, they have a lot of their records are available online, which is really helpful. They're usually like in the Eastern District of New York. If you look on that on FamilySearch, you can go and you can click on the box and you can scroll in there and check out those records. And I'll show you what I mean in a second when I say that. Land records, as I mentioned before, are the earliest types of record that we have in this country. They start with colonial land grants all the way back from Europe, people getting grants to own land in this country. We have military land grants of people who have served in the military, especially in the Revolutionary War, who have been granted land for their service. There's also the land ordinances of 1785 when people started going out west and start claiming some land for themselves. And then you have the Homestead Act, which was started by Abraham Lincoln in 1862, which is a great, that's when they gave people 160 acres of land for a very small price, and they had to keep up with it for 5 years. And if they showed that, you know, they didn't burn the place down, they were able to keep the land, which is pretty great. Let's see. Oh, this here is a land transaction between my 10th great grandparents and their children, saying that she's leaving. It's between Luke McGuire and Thomas Durbin, and they're giving the land, they're mentioning the relationship that they have. They're mentioning the service because one of them knew the other one from fighting together in the Revolutionary War. And also that the other one Thomas Durbin had married Luke McGuire's sister. And all that's written in these land records. It's not as cut and dry as we have in 2021, but a lot of these earlier land records tell a story about the relationship, about why these people decided to give this land to this person, and this person in particular, whether it be for their wedding, they had military service with them, they were their neighbors or whatever. So you can find a little story in there. So that's pretty cool. And again, contact your local courthouse, ask how you can find these records. And some of them are starting to be available on FamilySearch. You just have to know where to look to go finding them. But for now, I think contacting the courthouse is probably your best bet. Last will and testament, also known as those probate or estate records. In your last will and testament, as I mentioned before, people had very few items compared to what we have today. And they took great care in those items, and they thought long and hard, usually, who they were going to give those items to. And the last will and testament is a great way of getting a glimpse about how that person's life, or what was valuable and who was valuable to those people. They describe what type of property they have. And by looking at the property, you can see maybe what their occupation was, even if they were a farmer. You can see if they were a dairy farmer, or if they were more in livestock, what was valuable to them? What was their lifestyle like? They also mention the family members and how they're related to them. It's a great resource in finding out parental connections. It's really, really great. Marital statuses, people will say that they are the widow of so-and-so, or they leave behind their spouse. Again, you can see occupation. And a lot of times in these records, people will leave a portion of their money to a particular church, and also to take care of their burial. So right there, you have where the person's buried, and you have a church which you can then contact and ask for those baptismal and marriage records. And also then one up it and say, do you have all these other records for this family here? And if you're super duper lucky, it may have mentioned if there was a family Bible and who has this family Bible. And then you can go track down their descendants and start bothering them. So vital records, as we kind of talked about before, when you're looking for vital records, what are they? Those are those birth, marriage, death, divorce records. Don't even worry about divorce records because you're probably not going to get them. Good for you if you have. Places you can get them, the specific town website, and then call them and say, hey, can I get these records? How do I get these records? The Vital Check, that website that likes to rip people off, but it's a great source if you have no idea where your family is from. Maybe you just know a state, then you probably want to go through Vital Check, because that will kind of lead you there more directly. When you're requesting records, it's very important to know the difference between a genealogy copy and a certified copy. Now, for most cases, probably what you're looking for is a genealogy copy. Genealogy copy, though, if you're looking at a death record, will not include the cause of death. It does not have that certified seal on it. If you are, though, trying to obtain citizenship in another country, you will need a certified copy of a vital record. And the reason that's important to know is in a lot of states, especially New York, if you want a certified copy, you have to prove descendancy to that person, direct descendancy, and then you have to provide a vital record connection to that next person. So if I wanted, for example, to go get my great grandparents' birth certificate, I have to provide my relationship to my parents, my grandparents, and actually I have to show them that my grandfather has passed away and that I'm able to collect this information now. Always indicate that you want the long form because sometimes they will just give you pretty much a piece of paper saying that, yes, this person's birth record has been recorded here on this date. You want the long form that has the person's names, their parents' names, any additional information about their family. So just write on there that you do, in fact, want the long form. Check out for each state has a period of a release of when they can release records, whether it be sometimes with death immediately, other places 25, 50, 75, 100 years. Be familiar of these record release periods. And also when you're requesting them, are they asking you, as I just mentioned before, is there relationship requirements to obtaining these records? Are they only giving it to the direct descendants? Do you have to show proof? And always include your driver's license, because that's usually just something that they require. Looking for family history centers and affiliate libraries. Sometimes if you're on FamilySearch and you're looking at a record, you may see an image that comes across and it says this image is not available, or they have a little lock and key. That means you can go to a family history center and you can then go and view that original record. This is an original record for my a death record for one of my great-great-grandmothers. And I was able to get this at a family history center, whereas if I was just to look online, it just says image is not available, or it's just a regular transcript. These are just some places. I'm not quite sure if Sayville has access to the Family History Center, but you can go to libraries like the Smithtown Library, Longwood, Middle Country Library, Patchogue. There are some places that have this available to them. Other places that you might want to also check out is the National Archives, which are just starting to open back up after a year of being closed. For New York, it's this one. And for the gentleman who had asked about his family, who are the police officers, this is a very good resource for you to contact the National Archives and just tell them what you're interested in. See if they have any information. You can usually find passenger and arrival records, certain vital records, especially for New York City, there's a lot there. Census records, which are also available online. And if it's after 1906, this is where you'd be able to find naturalization records for your family. And if you have, usually I have my little library card here with me, that's downstairs. If you are a resident of New York, definitely go on to the New York Public Library website and sign up to get a library card. And that's going to give you access to a ton of different newspaper databases that you can't find anywhere else. They're not available on newspapers.com or Genealogy Bank, but are specific to New York. You can go and you can peruse them. You can see any type of, they also have genealogical librarians on staff that you can also call and ask them, to direct you. They have a lot of great, if you ever get a chance to go there, it's really pretty. This is just a picture of it. And they have so many wonderful genealogy books there from all over the world. It's a really great resource that, again, you can make a whole day out of. And before you go visiting any place, and I wrote this before COVID, first call and make sure they're open, and they're open to the public. Because nothing's worse than when you're planning your day and then you get there and nobody's there to let you in. First, go to the website of wherever you're looking to visit and see what records are available online. If they have an index that you can search, go through there, write down the family member whose information you're looking to get, when whatever event happened, and if there's any index referencing number, so that when you go to the place, you can go right
Dad
to
asked me to ask you to ask me if there's anything you would like to ask him to tell him.
I think somebody's unmuted, but if there's anything that you want, please let me know. when you go to any of these repositories, you kind of want to almost be ready to spend the whole day there, because you don't know at what speed the other person is going to be getting the information for. Sometimes you might have to rely on somebody else to go looking for this information, and they might be very busy. So just be patient. Bring cash. Some places may charge a fee, especially a copying fee. Bring pencils, ID, a notebook, any notes that you have. And ask too if laptops and phones are allowed. Sometimes they make you put things in a locker, and you don't want to get caught taking things with your phone, and then people get mad and it's embarrassing. So don't do that. And as you start finding information, make sure you document your sources, because you're really going to thank your future self that you remembered where you got this from. And it wasn't just, crazy Aunt Mabel talking at a family reunion and, she made up a few stories, but you actually have the documents that you can go back to, and your descendants can go back to, and they can look at them also. And again, as you're collecting all this information and going about your genealogical research, just keep in mind that every single one of your ancestors has a story to tell you. And if you're trying to just look for names, dates, and places, this isn't going to be any interest to you. It's going to be a one-shot deal. Try to find the story behind these people. Use those names and dates and places to build that story. See what's going around in that time period, and place your ancestors in a time and place, and really make them into real people. And that's what's going to grab your family's attention and keep this person alive for generations to come. And of course, don't forget to share that story. Don't just keep it all to yourself, because we don't want to just die and have all our hard work go to waste. But be ready to share that story, and also document your own too. So any questions that you have? I know before I mention, I'm going to show you, I'm going to unscreen share this, because I'm going to show you just a few things. Does anybody have any questions while I figure out how to work technology?
I do again.
Cool.
So I've come to find that like some people and things and information I'm looking for, like here in the city, like in Brooklyn,
Mhm.
I probably would be able to find on school records, for enrolling children. I don't know what kind of things they used to have. Do schools keep this kind of information? Do they make it available?
Good question, because that's actually one of the new things that
I can't find these things, and people, addresses, and all that kind of thing. Both
So-
parents' names and
New York. Are you seeing my screen share or no?
it's a Zoom page.
Okay. Yes. Well, I'm going to show you this. So one of the things that Ancestry is in the process of, and it hasn't really kicked in yet for New York, is getting school records. That's not really something that is available yet to us. Yearbook records are available. Have you checked that out with Ancestry? They go back to, I think, 1905.
Yeah, it's before. It's probably before that.
Yeah, and again, like school records, based on the time, people might have just thrown it out. Once a person was done with the school, that's kind of like, okay, we don't have room for all these things. Now it's in the trash. There's no mandate that people had to keep those records for a certain period of time, I believe. Are you seeing a FamilySearch page right now? No. Okay. hold
Zoom
on.
page.
Let me see if I can get this here. Okay. I think you could be here. Now you see a FamilySearch page? Excuse me.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So if you go to FamilySearch, so this is how you can find out if records are available. Now you're looking in Brooklyn, right?
Right.
Okay. So this is for anybody looking for any records. I first go to the search thing. Now I never, like 99% never put information in this general search thing. I always go to the map and I highlight where I'm looking. Do you have, off the top of your head, do you have anybody who you're looking for in Brooklyn?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to tell me their names?
You know, that's the part of the thing too, is good. She had multiple names, but
Okay.
her first name that she probably would have used for school was Hattie, Hittie,
Okay.
which is not her name, and Greiner, Greiner.
Just spell it really slow for me. G.
Greiner.
Okay. And she was born in Brooklyn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dubelt. I got the wrong
Last name is Dubelt.
name. Yeah, Dubelt.
Ubelt. S or no?
Yeah, no S.
She was born in Brooklyn.
Berlin.
Berlin. But she lived in Brooklyn, correct?
She was brought over as a baby.
So Germany. And we're gonna have her have a residence in Brooklyn. Okay. About when was she born? Any idea or no?
I want to say 1880, 1881.
Okay.
Top of my head.
Sure. All right, so for New York, our vital records start in 1880. Brooklyn started a little bit before that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna find anything with school, so I can just kind of, knock that out of the park. Do you know when she died or anything?
Let's say 1852, maybe?
Okay.
Or
She
40.
died in Brooklyn?
Yes.
Okay. So what I just did here was I put this information down and then I scrolled down to filter by collection, because when you do these searches here, only 20% of record collections actually get searched. So by going in here and checking these boxes, I'm only searching in these categories. So I'm just looking here, New York death and burial. I'm gonna just put Billion Graves, why not? And let's see, and like oh shoot. Oop. Go back. Okay. Figure out she has the census. God. And she was married, yeah?
She was married, and that's the other thing. The husband was there, and then he disappeared. And
What a good man. Okay. She's not going to be embarrassed. We'll put her in, and she died in the 50s, so she's not going to be in that collection. Okay. I'm just kind of picking things at random here. Okay, and Western District. Okay, let's see if we see anything here. Just kind of, so once you check out the boxes that you're interested in, you go back up, and this can be with anybody at any event. You go to the map, hit search, and of course there's no results. So let's look at what records would be available for Brooklyn. So you go into catalog, and in catalog, you put New York, because you want to go backwards. So you go big to small, where we usually do like town, county, state. It's the other way. So in this case, we're going to do Brooklyn. And this is going to give you all the different types of records that are available on FamilySearch that you can go looking for. So they have schools, but I doubt that your family, because I've never heard of, the Polywog is the Polytech Institute. So they do have some schools on here, but not much. So if you wanted to look for vital records, you go in here and you can search by hand some of the different vital records. Now, if you click on this, it's not going to be indexed yet. So you could see, okay, they have these death records for this time period. You have to find a family history library near you and then go there. And then once you get there, these magic lock keys are going to disappear, and you'll be able to go in and actually look at the actual records.
Okay.
Did you know that existed before, or just did I tell you something you already knew? Be honest.
I knew that these places you could go look things up, but I just haven't had a chance to
Okay.
stuff organized. So
Play around with it. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so the card catalog is really helpful with this kind of stuff. Anybody else have any? Excuse me. Whew, it's been a long day. Anybody else? Yes,
I have a question. Did you say you work for Legacy Family Tree?
legacy tree, yes.
Legacy Tree. I've been doing my family tree. I have an extensive family tree. I'm doing it on Legacy. And they always
Oh, I
let
know
me,
it's a different company from that. I'm a legacy tree genealogist. Legacy Tree, the software, I actually know.
oh,
nothing about.
that's not you.
No, that's not me.
Okay, never mind.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No problem.
Any other questions or anything, or anyone else? No. So I'll send this presentation to the library. So if anybody would like it, hopefully the library can send this out, and you can
Yeah,
look at it.
I'll send it out to everybody who
great.
registered.
Thanks, Peter. Perfect. All right, well, I think that's it. Peter, thank you so much for another presentation and for setting this up, and please extend my thanks to the library, and thank you everybody for spending the evening with me. Appreciate it.
Thank
All
you.
right, everybody, have a great